Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes.
Oh, whoa.
Today we're going deep on Immanuel Kant's religion within the bounds of bare reason. It's pretty famous, right?
Yeah.
Published back in 1793, this book is like a philosophical deep dive into faith and reason.
Definitely a cornerstone of Enlightenment thought.
So for anyone listening,
You could say.
that isn't really up on their Kant, could you give us the
Sure.
quick rundown of this book?
Absolutely. So imagine you're trying to figure out what it really means to be religious. Kant argues that true religion isn't about blind faith or rituals or even, trying to win God's favor. He says genuine religious belief is all about morality.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
not about church every Sunday or anything. It's
Right.
more about just being a good person.
You got it. He's really into this idea of moral religion, like a religion that's based on reason and being ethical.
And he sees Christianity as like
Right.
the best example of that.
He does, although, he definitely has some critiques of how it's often practiced.
Yeah, he's not one to shy away from
No,
controversy, is he? I heard he even had trouble
not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
getting it published.
Oh, totally. He actually wanted to release it as a series of essays, but the censors, they blocked the second one. They accused him of interfering with biblical theology.
Oh, wow.
But he did eventually get the whole book published through the University of Königsberg.
He was teaching.
Exactly. But even then, the criticism didn't stop. I mean, he even got a royal order accusing him of distorting scripture.
That's pretty ironic, getting censored during the Enlightenment.
Right. You'd think that would be the time for
Yeah.
freedom of thought.
It really shows how radical
Absolutely.
his ideas were. So let's get into the book.
Okay, sounds good.
Where does he kick things off?
Well, he jumps right into this idea of radical evil in human nature. He says we all have this tendency towards selfishness and doing wrong. It's like a constant battle within us.
Oh, so it's not like some outside force. It's
Totally.
an internal struggle.
Precisely. He's setting up this argument that real religion is about overcoming that evil through moral effort, choosing good even when it's tough.
That makes sense. But if they're all flawed, how can we ever be truly good?
Right. That's where he brings in this idea of justification. It's that classic question.
Right.
How can imperfect people be worthy of God's grace? His answer is pretty radical. He rejects the whole idea that we can earn God's favor through rituals or sacrifices or rules.
So no shortcuts.
Nope, none. For Kant, it's all about inner transformation. It's about making a conscious effort to be better, which takes a lot of work.
It's a pretty demanding view of religion.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely not about blind faith or dogma. It's about constantly trying to be better.
Exactly. So that's where his idea of pure religious faith comes in.
Yeah. It's not about believing specific doctrines or historical events. It's this recognition that there's a higher moral order to the universe.
So a faith that's based on reason, but also kind of goes beyond it.
You nailed it. It's a really cool idea. And it's central to his vision of the true church.
And that true church, it's not about... Nope. For Kant, the true church is this ideal community of people who are committed to moral principles. They strive to be ethical, to treat each other with dignity, and basically create a more just world.
That sounds pretty utopian.
It does. And Kant knows it's a really difficult goal.
Yeah.
But he believes it's worth striving for.
Yeah.
And that religion can help us get there.
Yeah. That's a pretty big
goal.
He's not just redefining religion, but also how we think about ethical societies.
He's challenging us to think about faith in a new way, It's not about blind obedience. Right.
It's about using our reason to understand what's right and wrong, and then living by it.
It's a powerful message for sure. But didn't he also have strong opinions on what he called religious delusion? He did. What were some of the dangers he saw in misguided religious practices?
Yeah, he really digs into that. He calls these practices religious delusion, basically putting on a show of being religious instead of actually being ethical.
So like going through the motions, but not really living those moral principles.
Yeah, exactly. It's like focusing on rituals and sacrifices to win over God. Kant says that misses the whole point. He sees it as almost like a fake kind of service to God.
Right, like hypocrisy.
Yes. And he goes even further. He's not a fan of relying on miracles as proof of religious truth.
Oh, interesting.
He thinks it actually weakens the importance of reason and moral conviction.
So you need a miracle to believe.
yeah, then your faith isn't really based on understanding or morality.
Like taking a shortcut.
Right. Kant wants us to understand that genuine faith comes from being committed to ethical principles.
Not supernatural stuff.
Exactly. What else? Oh, he also talks about blind faith and too much focus on religious dogma.
Okay.
He worries people get so caught up in specific interpretations of Scripture that they forget the ethical message behind it.
So you can't just accept things blindly.
Right. You have to think critically about those beliefs and see if they match up with your own sense of right and wrong.
It's about using your own reason.
Exactly. Blind faith can hold you back from growing morally.
So Kant is really going for a total reform of religion, right?
You could say that. He wants to take away the parts he sees as superstition or distractions from morality.
But he's not trying to get rid of religion completely.
No. He wants us to think about faith differently, to move past those rituals and dogmas.
To the core of what it means to be religious. It's pretty amazing that his ideas are still so relevant today.
Yeah, for sure.
We're still dealing with these same questions of faith and reason and how to be good.
It shows you that the search for meaning and morals is something we all struggle with. But there's one part of the book that's really controversial.
Oh, you mean when he claims his own time was the best period in church history?
That's the one. Sounds a bit arrogant, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Oh.
But we have to understand what he meant. He's not saying religious institutions were perfect or that everyone was enlightened. He's talking about how reason was becoming more important in religion.
So he saw all the critical thinking and questioning authority as a good thing?
Yes. He saw it as progress toward a more mature and ethical faith. It was a step toward what he called the true church.
A community united by moral principles. Makes sense. But his views on other religions, like Judaism, seem a little off, given his emphasis on universality.
You're right to point that out. That's definitely one of the most controversial parts of the book. He said that Judaism wasn't a stage in the development of the true church.
Really?
Yeah, he saw it as mainly political, focused on laws rather than moral principles.
It doesn't really sound like his usual message of tolerance.
I know. It shows that even the smartest people can be influenced by the prejudices of their time.
It reminds us to be critical of everything we read.
Absolutely. But even with that, religion within the bounds of bare reason is still really important. It makes us think about faith, reason, and ethical living.
It's definitely given us a lot to think about. I'm especially interested in this idea of the true church.
Oh, yeah.
Does he give any real guidance on how to create that kind of community?
He does. Two key things, actually.
Okay.
The first is universality.
What's he mean by that?
He means a religion that's open to everybody, no matter their background, culture, or status. It's about our shared humanity.
So no more chosen people.
Not in this true church.
No.
Everyone has dignity and worth.
That fits in with the Enlightenment's focus on equality.
Totally. It's about reason and compassion, not dogma or exclusion.
Okay, universality.
What's the second thing?
Purity.
Like no more sin. Haha, not quite. He means focusing on moral conduct as the most important part of religion.
So putting those principles into action.
Yes. Treating each other well and working to make the world better.
It's like a plan for a better society, not just a better church.
Exactly. That's what's so powerful about his ideas. He's not just trying to fix religion. He wants a more ethical and just world.
I really like his optimism, even knowing that humans make mistakes. It reminds us that ideas can inspire us to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why this book is still so relevant today. It makes us think about religion's role in our lives, question our assumptions about faith and reason, and work towards a better world.
This has been a really eye-opening discussion.
Oh, good.
Kant's book is definitely a tough read, but it's full of thought-provoking ideas. I have a whole new perspective on religion, faith, and moral reasoning.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's been great exploring these ideas with you. And to everyone listening, I really encourage you to check out Kant's work.
Yes. For all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into religion within the bounds of bare reason. We hope you found it as stimulating as we did. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep those conversations going. Welcome back to our deep dive into Kant's Religion Within the Bounds of Bare Reason. We left off talking about the true church.
Right. And that tricky question, does belief even matter when morality seems to be the priority?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear how Kant addresses that.
So he makes this distinction between historical faith and pure religious faith.
Okay.
Historical faith is all about relying on things like scriptures and past events and
And
traditions.
that's the type of faith that can lead to dogma and those religious delusions.
Exactly. Clinging to those interpretations or putting tradition above ethics can cause a lot of problems.
Right, it can be divisive. So what about this pure religious faith? What's that all about?
This is where things get really interesting. Pure religious faith, according to Kant, comes from our own moral compass. It's not about external authority or history, but an internal conviction that the universe operates on a higher moral order.
So it's almost like a faith that's born from understanding right and wrong.
You got it. It's realizing that those universal ethical principles point to something bigger than ourselves, a source of good and justice that goes beyond our limited human understanding.
It's faith that's rooted in reason, but also reaches further, beyond what our minds can fully grasp.
Exactly. It doesn't contradict reason, but it goes beyond what we can actually prove. It is a leap of faith, you could say.
Amazing. So for Kant, true religion is this blend of reason and faith.
Exactly. It's about basing our beliefs on ethical principles while accepting that some things are beyond our comprehension.
This brings us back to the true church, doesn't it? Not buildings or denominations.
Right. A community of people dedicated to those moral principles, living them out, treating each other well, and making the world better.
It's such an inspiring vision. But is this kind of ethical utopia even possible in the real world?
That's the challenge. Kant doesn't pretend it's easy. He knows people can be selfish, greedy, and tempted by power. But he still has hope. He thinks that if we keep developing our moral reasoning and try to live by that moral law, we can move towards a more just and ethical world.
It's a journey we're all on together then.
Yeah. And Kant sees religion, when it's understood correctly, as a big help on that journey. It can give us a framework for ethical behavior, a supportive community, and a sense of purpose that goes beyond our individual lives.
His optimism is pretty remarkable. It's a good reminder that even philosophical concepts can help make the world better.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's why this book, Religion Within the Bounds of Bare Reason, is still so important today. It makes us think about religion's place in our lives and work towards a more ethical and just world.
This has been a really great deep dive.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Kant's book is a challenge, but it's full of such insightful ideas. It's given me a totally new perspective on religion, faith, and moral reasoning.
That's fantastic to hear. It's been a pleasure discussing this with you. And to everyone listening, I highly recommend exploring Kant's work for yourselves.
Yes. To all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Immanuel Kant's Religion Within the Bounds of Bare Reason. We hope you found it as thought-provoking as we did. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations going.